Good morning, Charlene SanJenko. Welcome to another Gather for Her conversation. We're very, very excited to welcome you this morning as we kick off our awkward August conversations. And just before we begin, I would like to welcome you and let you know that I'm hosting this conversation from my home, gratefully located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish First Nations on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. And I welcome you from wherever you are calling home this morning. I'd like to introduce you to, and for those of you on the call live, you know them as well as I do now, to my two co-hosts this morning. I'm just going to ask them to say hello and introduce themselves. Tina Overbury and Sharon Marshall are with us this morning. Good morning, Tina.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am coming to you today floating on the Coast Salish Sea on the island of Wachlelachum, which is a Squamish name for Bowen Island. So glad to be here, and you're gonna laugh. Like, I'm actually sitting in the man cave, like in my boy den, which has the best Wi-Fi. If I took my background, you'd be like, ew. I'm like, yep. Yeah, mom of three boys. So I'm really happy to be here in awkwardly August.
So great.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Marshall, and I am excited to be here today. I am sitting on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation and of the Coast Salish peoples. And really, I'm in Lanceville. And it's interesting because I thought I was on the, sorry, I said Snuneymuxw. It's Snuneymuxw. Snuneymuxw First Nation. I thought I was on the Nanaimo, but it's actually Snuneymuxw. And so there you go. Happy to be here today. Awkward.
It's all good. All good. And I want to just acknowledge our good friend and co-host, Christina. Benty's not able to join us live today, but her thoughts and her energy is with us. And I also want to welcome all of you and the PowHERhouse team that's here with us as well. So one of the neat things about these conversations are that, our job is to dive into them, but also to witness them. We're here to create a container and see what shows up. The neat thing about the conversations are that they are recorded and they actually become a piece of what we call an integrated media series. So we give them we give them legacy. We give our words and what shows up today legacy through written, through visual drawing, through the video recording. And I think we're, as you all know, I think we're just really scratching the surface of the purpose-driven vehicle that media can be. So I'm grateful for you helping create that container today. I want to welcome a very special guest, a very special friend and colleague with PowHERhouse, Kathryn Pollack. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Kathryn. She's going to help us dive in today with a fierce dialogue, and I'll let her kind of explain what that means to her. Kathryn is a wife and a mother, and she is, I would describe her as a keenly attuned and accountable senior leader, and she really believes in bringing your whole self to how you lead, to every moment, to all that you do. We talk a lot in our friendship about flow and artistry and rhythm. And we'll talk about that from her background. I've learned a lot from her about like presence and flow and performance in a way that maybe a lot of us haven't thought about it before. She strives to create safe spaces and dynamic environments where meaningful and sometimes fierce dialogue and connection can actually happen and help to weave the fabric of full engagement and ultimate performance. You'll see a little more closely what I mean as we dive into today's conversation. And officially and professionally, she's the Chief Strategy Officer of Praxis Consulting, and she's the Vice Chair of Connexus Credit Union, the Board of Directors, She's a powerhouse from the prairies who we've had just the immense pleasure of working closely with for almost 2 years, and a great friend. So welcome, Kathryn, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Charlene. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's really humbling, and it's amazing to hear things like that reflected back to you, from someone I respect so much. So thank you for that. And so I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is part of Treaty 4 territory, traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Nakota, Lakota, and Dakota First Nation, and the homeland of the Métis. So really happy to be able to participate today, and really looking forward to our conversation. And I love that it's Awkward August. So I'm like not nervous at all, because if I'm awkward, then it's perfect.
Can you remember, Kathryn, when you first dove into that article about fierce dialogue? Do you remember what the context was and some framework? I'm wondering if you could share that, and we will also be obviously sharing that article again for our guests. But I'm just curious, like, what prompted those words?
Yeah, when I put myself back in that time, I recall feeling like, I was in these rooms with these incredible people, people with influence and power. I mean, we can talk about what that means, but, just with incredible positions and influence in the community at large. And I kept feeling like there were so many times where we were dancing around the big hairy issue. Like there was just, we were not even really scratching the surface. And I was really struggling with, are people not prepared to go there, not comfortable to talk about that thing that just seems so glaringly obvious to me? Or do we not have the tools to do that? Or is the space not safe enough? And so that was what really got me thinking about this concept of fierce dialogue. And it really, when I really went into examining it and trying to put some words to it, it really circled back for me around to sort of my roots in the corporate world, which was around community engagement and stakeholder engagement, and the importance of creating two-way dialogue. And so there's this beautiful quote I came across from David Bohm, this amazing physicist, who talked about dialogue being this stream of meaning flowing through us and among us. And so that importance of the fact that when we have true dialogue with someone else, that we get to places we could never get on our own, right? And it's about being open to those possibilities. And so that was the context for me. I just felt like, we weren't getting to the meat of these big issues, and the right people were in the rooms to be having those conversations. And
you're like speaking my language, as you know, Kathryn. To me, communication is a sacred practice, and I really love what you. I love those 3 questions that you asked. Are we not prepared to go there? Do we not have the tools? Is the space not safe enough? And I'm wondering what you came up with. Where did those questions take you?
Yeah, well, in the context that I was kind of operating in at the time, honestly, I think it was a mix of all 3 a little bit. I think maybe less about the tools, because I really believe that most of the people around those tables were equipped with the tools to have the conversations. But, the feeling safe, psychologically safe enough to go there, and really being prepared for, I guess, the consequences is really what, are we prepared to go there? Because when you go there, you're going to uncover some stuff probably that, is going to take effort, resources, collective vision, that kind of thing. And so I think, there was a bit of, also unwillingness to go there because of what those consequences could be, and, the ramifications of, potentially that level of change or that shift in direction.
Yeah. And I love that we're in awkward August, right? Because consequences are awkward. Risking consequences is awkward. And then you put the word awkward next to safety, like in the work that you do around fierce conversations. Can you tell us a little bit about how you prepare us, or people, how you prepare, actually for leaders, how do you prepare yourself to hold the awkward space of the fierce conversation?
Well, I think there's a lot that goes into that, but at a sort of high level, there's sort of the work you do personally to be present, and so whatever that means for you. So for myself, that's things like my daily meditation practice. It's also getting in tune with nature, hopefully every day, getting exercise, so that I'm in the right space to be there. On the sort of interpersonal level, I think it's about, just so much of that is about building that trust. And Charlene knows this one about me, is that I'm a person who comes to the table with my trust jar full. I don't say, people don't have to earn my trust, you just have my trust. But I know that's not the case for everyone. And so building relationships with people that create that foundation of trust, where it doesn't necessarily naturally exist for everyone, I think is really important. But then I think sometimes we have to fast track that, right? Like if I'm stepping into a community engagement session, like I don't have months to get to know people. And so I think so much of that is, again, about how you present as a person and being really authentic and present and in the moment, and being prepared to, again, like the two-way dialogue and that concept of a stream of meaning. Like people get that really quickly when you're, this, obviously, I'm, preaching to the choir, but, when you're truly listening to someone and that conversation, that dialogue builds, people feel heard, and then that trust starts to build because she heard me. My words are being heard and being reflected back, and it's building to something else. So that trust, I think that's a big part of building that trust quickly.
Kathryn, can I ask, do you try with your community engagement sessions, do you try gathering in a circle?
Yes, sometimes. It really depends on the scale. But we certainly do. And in fact, even in the large, like where I've had large sessions and they're kind of come and go type of community sessions, which obviously we're not doing right now. But when I've had those larger sessions, we do tend to set the room up in a circle. So even if it's a bunch of stations around a room, that they would be set in a circle. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, the reason I ask is because I know for the community engagement that I did as a community planner for an Indigenous for First Nation, having the room set up in a U shape or in a circle made everybody feel safer, and it put everybody on the same level.
Yeah.
And so that made people feel more open to communicating, and the dialogue was much freer.
Yes, 100%. And I tend to avoid, in fact, I'm trying to think, I don't think I've ever hosted a community session that is constructed like a town hall, where you have somebody standing at the front and a bunch of people sitting in rows. I don't think I've ever pulled together an event like that, because exactly as you say, it doesn't facilitate a really meaningful conversation or meaningful engagement.
Right.
I think what we're talking about and is so important. You know, we you know, just to kind of give conversations like this context. It's about, you know, it's one thing to have these intimate conversations amongst women, but that's our practice time. That's our, you know, if we can take these conversations into the boardroom, into a community setting. You know, I just was chatting with Tina yesterday about, I've been in that situation at a public hearing with 700 people in front of me. And it was very fierce dialogue. And so it takes it, you know, where do we actually practice the skill of presence, of I'm listening with love, even though I don't necessarily agree with you, I am listening to you and I'm wide open to hear you. And I will reflect my decision back to you and why I, with my values, made that decision. And I think women, we really need to understand that it is a muscle and a skill that we have to build as part of our leadership. And I remember in one of those situations, someone standing up and actually said back to me, who was obviously not on the same opinion I was on, actually stood up and said, I want to thank you for listening and giving me your attention, even though we may not see and it was actually quite moving because we were obviously not in agreement with this, but he still felt like I was listening and open to him. And I think, you know, even though we will have lots of fun with these conversations this month, there is a reason that we're having them. And in the world in which we live right now, this is a skill, listening with love and being heard. And this is a skill that really, really needs to be fired up. So I wanted to actually dig into our first question, and it's one that you and I kind of co-created together, and thank you for that. But the question is, and I hope everyone kind of gives it some thought for yourselves. And if you'd even like to throw in some answers in the chat, we certainly welcome them because we want to dive in. What do you feel, Kathryn, is the conversation or the fierce dialogue that most needs to be had right now by Canadian women? Most needs to be had at this time, but that we are probably, or we might not feel quite ready to have. And so that situation that you were describing of it's there, it's in the room, it's obvious that it's there and none of us really want to talk about it. And you're sitting there going, am I the only one that sees this here? Then I'm curious what that conversation is for you.
Yeah, so I've been thinking, well, a lot about this for a while, and then since our last conversation have been really holding space for this. And so, you know, I feel like there's no coincidence that we're in the midst of a global pandemic and things like what happened to George Floyd happen. And here in Canada, Regis Korsinski-Paquette. This, I feel like, you know, as Michael Beckwith calls it, the corona bonus, is that, you know, the distractions that have been pulling us away from seeing things in the world just weren't there. And it was that, you know, opportunity for us to really get real about what's going on in our society. And again, not to downplay the severity of COVID, like when I said corona bonus, you know, please don't take that in a negative way. I just mean what's a positive we can find in this is that by us not rushing around, being busy, going here and there to a million other things, we're actually starting to see things in a different light that, you know, I think some of us we knew that was happening, but it's been kind of exposed to us on another whole other level. And, you know, it's interesting too, because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was all this reference to COVID-19 being the great equalizer, right? But that's not at all what's happened. You know, in fact, it's the opposite. The marginalized communities are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. People who were already struggling financially are more worse off than they were before. And so this is, you know, I come back around to what is the leadership role we can be playing to really start to look at how can we construct a society, an economy that is more, for lack of a better word, just, that still provides people with the opportunity for abundance and all those opportunities we want as an individual for ourselves and our family, while not leaving other people behind. So at the micro level, you know, what are we doing in our lives that might be contributing without us realizing to, you know, potentially the more negative side, or what can we contribute on the positive side? So what are those conversations we should be having at the kitchen table with our families, you know, with our children, with our spouses, with our parents? You know, multiple generations need to have this conversation. I think we forget that one too, right? Our parents, you know, can still learn and change as well. You know, I think about my father, wonderful, open-minded man. He's in his 80s. He comes from a different generation, and he continues to prove to me that he can change, you know, his outlook. So I think on the micro level, really challenging ourselves to be having those fierce conversations at the kitchen table about what's going on in the world, in a way that's, you know, obviously productive for our children and our families. And I think, you know, it's still at a micro level, but a little bit up at the more macro scale is like, is there a way my business or my industry can make a difference? How can we contribute to, you know, advancing society? We just, you know, we can look at this, obviously, the pandemic with a negative perspective, and yes, it's impacting people very negatively, or we can take it in the positive light that there's an opportunity to reconstruct how we're living our lives, and, you know, how we're taking care of people, and, you know, the economy at large.
I thank you for that. I wanted to just like create lots of room for you to just keep going, because the longer we talk we've said the thing that we know, and then we're saying things we're not sure that I'm not saying you said things you're not sure you know, but I'm saying that it's like I landed in that word pause. And when we're willing to just, like we are right now, speak what's in the space, there's some new things that come up, and there's some things that I want to bring up that Alyssa brought in here. I want to speak to a little bit, and then I actually want to see if we want to try something. Just trust me on this one, Char. Let's just give this a go, okay? I wanted to unpack the word fierce a little bit, and Alyssa made this suggestion here to Char's question about unpacking our own biases, like white privilege. And we can go into white privilege, which we could do, but I wonder if we want to take a step back and just go into biases first. White privilege is one of them, and it's an important one. And around the word fierce, like, what are the things that we are fierce about? We are fierce about the things that we want to protect, right? The things that we love, and we can be fierce or we can be fierce. And I'm wondering in this conversation, Kathryn, if you might want to or be willing to help us be fierce with ourselves in this moment, maybe in our chat, And what are some of the biases that we have that we're fierce about that we might open some space in today? I don't know. Can I volley that idea to you? And I don't even know how we do it, but if we can unpack fierce and bias, wow, just like take a few pins out of the pin cushion, that'd be pretty wicked.
Yeah. So I love what you said. You talked about, I think you went fierce and then you went fierce. And to me, fierce, the fierce that is referenced in my article and that I spoke about at an event of Charlene's was this fierce, this offering, this offering. And so it is about, to me, that fierce in the fierce dialogue is about coming to a conversation or a dialogue prepared. So you're knowledgeable, you've done your homework, like, you understand what you're talking about. And at the same time, you're willing to be moved off your position. So you come with a willingness to move. And I think from a societal perspective, and this is something that the community engagement world has been talking about now for quite a while, is how we've become so divisive in our society, where people are very pitted in positions. And so the work of a person doing community engagement is that much more challenging when you have, people coming very pitted in positions and not willing to be moved off. And so I think to participate in fierce dialogue, you have to come with that willingness to have your mind changed, to have your perspective changed. I think the one other thing I want to offer up, and then I'm just curious if there's other things that you'd like to delve into, is, when you were speaking about fierce, the thing that came to me is, I believe, and this is maybe a little out there, so bear with me, that the one root emotion is love, period. And that actually, when we really dig into the stuff that is kind of yucky, like fear and hate, so often it's doing what you were saying in this fierce of protecting, right? I'm protecting that which I love. I'm protecting, my position, or I'm, protecting my abundance, or like whatever that is. But I do think the root emotion is love. And if we can get back to that in how we deal with people, and it, speaks to what Charlene was sharing about, her experience in a town hall, where even in a town hall format where things can be very divisive, if we're listening with love, we may not end up in the same place, but we're moving together in some fashion towards a more collective vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so great. I'm curious, Sharon, just if anything's coming up for you around how, I think as women, as mothers, one of the things we have going for us is we have an inborn nurturing spirit. I do think we naturally come from a place of love. And I'm not saying that others don't, but I'm just saying it's up to us to recognize the gifts that we're born with, and how might those gifts be best used in various situations. I know in some of my toughest conversations, I will literally turn up that you're wagging your finger at me right now, and I am showering you with love. And I would literally just radiate love coming out from me to someone literally looking in my face doing one of these. And I'm curious, like from your You're such a gentle soul and a loving soul and a mother. I'm curious if you've had those experiences of where you remember that and try to bring it forward.
Certainly many times in raising my children, of course, but in community engagement sessions, absolutely being the facilitator and having that divide and trying to come to some common conclusion. But what really this conversation so far, the word that keeps coming up for me is fierce. And what I feel, the question is, what do we feel we need to do as leaders now? And I just can't help but think that there's an urgency to the work that needs to be done, and it's fierce. It's fierce, and fierce. If you look it up, it's the definition that I prefer to use is showing a heartfelt and powerful intensity. And so we have to turn up the notch. We have to turn up the dial. We have to turn up the dial a few notches. And I feel that this pause has brought us to it's time. Like we've had time to think about it. We've had time to think about it. And it's just, I just feel that's what we need to do now. And so I didn't really answer your question, but that's what I felt I needed to say.
Yeah. Kathryn, I want to sneak into our next question and try to dig a little deeper around this. And that is knowing that we're sitting in the pause, we want to turn up the intensity. What would you say? The distractions have dropped away. So what is it we do need to be doing right now? Whether we're willing to speak about it or not, let's give it some voice. Let's actually talk about where our attention needs to be, so we don't just keep rearranging cupboards or shuffling folders along a desk and focusing on stupid stuff, right? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. Well, and let's be real, rearranging your cupboards feels awesome, right? But the thing that really comes up for me is that it's the opportunity to get really clear about what drives me. Because I think that's what drives me, what feeds my spirit, my soul, that thing, that life force. We've all had those moments, right, where you call it flow, or you're just like so jazzed up about what it is you're doing. And I think that's a key insight into, me, I'm a strengths-based leader, where I like to help people to focus on their strengths, manage your weaknesses, focus on your strengths. Because I think it's in that magic of getting clear on what drives us and what our strengths are, which I think are the same things. They line up. That's where we find the opportunity to really make an impact. And I think then it's, how do I bring that forward to my leadership in my home, at my kitchen table, my leadership in my business or my industry, my leadership in my community. And I don't think that has to mean some big career change or some huge shift, get a new job or something. It's about how we approach things and how we play that strength card, if you will. If you imagine you have a handful of strengths, you identify some of your strengths, and when you're in challenging situations, well, what strength am I going to play today? Like, what's that card I'm going to put on the table? And so I think, if people are in in the space where they have more space in their life to get really clear on what that is that's our primary driver, I think that's work well done.
I want to add a little bit to that, if I may. I love that, Kathryn, what drives you. And I think as a group that brings many layers to the table. We're not a group that sees in one dimension, right? So I want to ask you a little bit about where positioning fits in this, because I think it can be tricky to say, well, this is my driver, therefore I'm positioned this way. And so when we're positioned, all of a sudden we're potentially pitted against. And that's not what we're talking about. So I'd love to just unpack a little bit more too about positioning, driving, what's healthy and when it's bias.
Right. So I actually see them as really different things, right? To me, a primary driver is that thing in your life that feeds you, right? So for me, that's things like building relationships, connecting people, communicating with people, meeting new people. So it's all, for me, my primary driver is relationships. And so I think then I do believe that's also my strength. And so then it's how do I bring that to the table as a leader all the time in every situation, even when it seems like it's maybe not the right time, maybe I need to really focus on developing a strategy as opposed to building a relationship. But actually, oftentimes, if you take a step back and think again, what if I play that strength card though? What would that look like? And it just fundamentally shifts how we approach challenging situations. So that's where my head was at on the driver. So not so much a positioning. Now I do think from this is maybe going to get a little bit off topic, but I think when we really get in tune with our primary drivers and our strengths, that's our key to, if we're developing a bit of a leadership brand, that's building your authentic leadership brand, because that's who you are. And for me, that's a big part of what the Amplify process was like working with Charlene and the team on that really helped me to unpack, that's who I am, and that's how those strengths play out. And no, I don't have to worry about how that's going to be perceived, because I'm different, I'm unique. And so I can play to those strengths, and that's part of my brand. So, not to say, again, I just go back to the important part of that is the authentic piece of getting in touch with what's driving.
I think if I could just add, I think as we expand, for me, it's always about expansion. How do we expand how we are in relationship? How do we expand that? And one of the ways that I think we expand that is by turning the word understanding into a verb. How do you really know someone? How do you really know someone and truly see someone? And it comes by taking the time to understand what drives them, where they're from. And I remember when I was 30 years old, I committed to doing some great work with Kathy Tursick, who we interviewed not long ago. And I came to a new understanding of who I was in the world and where that came from as a little girl who was adopted and because it's right from when you're young. And who I am in the world is worthiness connected. That's it. If you understand worthiness connected, you understand why Shar gets up in the morning, everybody, that's it. And how this relates into our biases, into our perceptions, into our drivers, and why this is important is we have the time and the space to really deepen our understanding. And I'll give you an example, and then I'm just going to pass it off. But I spoke to someone that we both know quite well, Kathryn, about a month ago. And one thing that she said to me, which, I mean, anytime I speak to an Indigenous woman, leader, person that can help me deepen my understanding of where I'm from and my culture, I greatly appreciate. She said, you know, one of the things I wish non-Indigenous people understood better was that every interaction, every conversation, every encounter that you have with an Indigenous person, that person comes to you with packs and packs and packs, a heavy load on their back. Whether they understand it or not, they come with this very heavy load of healing and trauma. And so when you come to a meeting with someone like that, when you come to a meeting, an Indigenous person and a non-Indigenous, and you can also say a Black and a white, are you really understanding in that meeting, you know, who you're meeting and how they're coming to that? Or are you thinking that you're meeting on, you know, and it's like, so I really, like, I got this harsh visual of meeting someone who is literally trying to stand up and thinking, you know, yeah, I'm pretty privileged having grown up in a safe, comfortable, caring environment. I need to really understand that someone I'm meeting with that didn't come up from that upbringing might be meeting me at a very different level. And do I even get that? Because I can't physically see it? Or am I that stupid that I just am gonna, you know, come with equal chops, right? And so I really wonder how we open ourselves up, because I think how we're experiencing relationship right now, and this is what I love about PowHERhouse, because I'm willing to dig into my relationships. Do we even have a clue how we could truly expand our relationships? You know, and that's why I love like opportunities like this and the fire dancers, and, you know, working with people through Amplify, because it takes time. It takes time. Curious, yeah, I want to kind of pass it off and you know, kind of close out the circle so we can invite some conversation with everyone else, but just kind of wondering where those thoughts take you.
Yeah, a couple things came to mind as you were speaking, and I was very privileged to have the opportunity to travel across Saskatchewan early this year, basically through the month of February into March, to 10 different communities to do some work with Aboriginal Friendship Centers across Saskatchewan. Incredible, incredible experience. And something that one of the gentlemen I was working with, an amazing Inuit man, you know, he said, I'm really challenging people to leave behind this concept of cultural competence and move to a place of cultural humility, or being culturally humble. And that resonated so deeply with me. And I felt like, you know, it touched me very deeply. And it also took away any fear I had about, because I've always tried to enter experiences with people from other cultures with a sense of openness and willingness for me to say, I might get this wrong. Can you please help me? Tell me if I'm, you know, doing something wrong, help me along the way. And to hear him say that, and then just shift the thinking and just be okay with, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't have to have the answers. I can't have the answers. There's no way that I can. And so every opportunity, I think, regardless if it's with an Indigenous person, with a person of color, with a new Canadian, you know, with anybody, it's like, you know, we have to come to the table with a sense of humility that, you know, we have no idea where someone has come from in their life. We don't know, you know, the weight of the baggage that they're carrying. And I don't say baggage with negative connotation. The other thing I just want to leave with before you pass it over to the group is circling back to something you said at the beginning of your last piece there, Charlene, about positioning or positions and getting underneath that. And it ties back into the community engagement stuff that seems to keep coming up today. And it's this really simple, interesting visual that I reference a lot in my work, whether I reference it just in my mind or sometimes I reference it verbally, is, you know, the image of the iceberg, which we all know very clearly. And the position is what we see above the water. So it's what you see someone coming into a room with, whether it's a big public engagement meeting or just a boardroom meeting or whatever that is. You know, so the position is what you see on top, and you might see a bit of the interest peeking out, but you know, the people's interests are underneath that position and they're usually peeking above the water a little bit, but you've got to do a little bit of work to get down to the interest. But the really important stuff under the interests are the values that inform, you know, how people live and how people are being in the world. And that's where, you know, I think we need to get to as leaders in our communities, in our businesses, in our relationships at large. And that's where I really think, when I think back to this article and other articles I've written, that's what the Amplify process did for me, was really connect my, you know, making sure that my leadership pillars and my leadership approach was deeply, authentically connected to my values.
I just want to for a minute. Kathryn, I understand why you take on fierce conversations. One of the pieces that I'm leaving with today is that your trust jar is full. And I think that sounds like a really simple concept, but it's really not. And I want to connect that image back to what fierce is and the word protection that came up. Because what popped into my head at that moment was, when our trust jar is full as a leader, one of the things it means is that we know ourselves and we know our values, and not just know our values, but we know ourselves. And I know you are a dancer. And so there's a whole other piece of knowing ourselves that isn't cognitive, but is in the experiential. It is standing in front of 700 people, as Shar said, or 7,000 people, or 70,000 people, or 7 million people, and being embodied with a trust jar full. And when our trust jar is full, there's actually nothing to protect anymore. We can be fierce with our self-love, and in that we can be fierce with the person across from us and their self-love, and do what Shar talks about, showering them with love without having to abandon our own jar. And so I want to acknowledge you for your fierce love and the open space that happened here today for all of us in the different pieces that we'll leave with, and the conversation of bias, that my wish for all of us is that we will leave this conversation feeling safe enough in our own trust jar to look at our bias. So as I'm looking at someone across from, or we're looking at someone across from us, we can go, what's my bias here? So I applaud you, and I want to give you an opportunity to have any last piece that's really important to you to say before we move into a group conversation.
Wow, thank you for reflecting that back, Tina. I love, wow, what you said about the trust jar and embodying that in, and the presence that comes with that. I got some tingles when you said a couple of things there. So thanks for that. Is there anything last I'd like to leave? I guess the last thing, as leaders, as, we're moving through all these, I don't even think we're in the pause anymore. We're just in this like shifting, everything is shifting underneath our feet. It feels like every day things are a little different. But I think we need to make sure that, as we go along, as we're learning new things about ourselves, about our families, about our society, about our community, making sure we're taking those along with us to inform how we're being and living as we go forward. So, when I hear getting back to normal or a new normal, or, I get a bit worried where it's like, well, we're learning a lot as we're going through this collectively and individually, and let's just make sure we're bringing that along and we're letting that inform how we live.
So great. Thank you, Kathryn.
Okay.
Thank you to our co-hosts. I'm just going to formally end our conversation there.